After 3 weeks of studying Ukrainian, I tried reading the Pokemon manga, which I've already done before in another language. But I was unable to understand the text, and when you're that far away from being able to understand the things you're reading or watching, just pushing through and doing more is not the answer. There are 3 ways of learning a language, and if you're using one of them, you'll have run into one of these problems. Method number one is that you memorize the 1000 most common words, and then you're somehow supposed to be able to follow content and use the language. The idea is nice. The process honestly sucks, and I know for a fact that I would not be able to force myself through a 1000 word list. The second way is to use an app like Duolingo, and then just follow the program till you finish the app, and that could take months, if not years for some people. The third way that people tend to learn is to just watch series or read books. The problem with this is that you won't understand what's happening nearly well enough for you to be able to learn from it. The problem isn't that it's not useful to do any of these things, but either that the order or the duration of the things is wrong. The problem with the word list or using apps is that it takes too long, either in a single day or for too many days depending on how many new words you learn. You're using a word list, or for lessons, if you're using an app like Duolingo, it's just too much effort. Even if you're doing it over a long time, that's just too much consistent effort of something that's inevitably boring. With watching content or reading books, that is my favorite way of studying. But it can't be done from the beginning because you're going to need some base vocabulary. It's a good step too, and it's what I advise people to do. But if you do it as step one, it won't work. There is a way to make word lists and apps useful as well, but it does take some work. The main point is that it just takes too long or too much effort to get what you need for you to start reading or watching content. This is always my main goal because I find the beginning super boring and tedious, and it's part of the 4-part system that I'm working on a longer video to explain in depth. The problem with word lists or app is that they're too general and they take too long. So the solution is quite simple. The app needs to teach you exactly what you need, and it needs to be finite with an obvious next step. If you're doing a word list, that is incredibly boring to work with, and so it makes sense that you should not make it unnecessarily long. One way, and in my opinion it is the best way, is to really narrow down the list as much as possible to then 200 super high frequency words and a list of 50 words that are specific to what you're going to be reading and watching. That's a great way to cut down on the amount of words that you need to learn. 250 words doesn't sound like a lot, but it could be what you need to start learning from reading and watching content. You might be tempted to learn more. Imagine how much 500 words will get you, but I would advise against extending the word list any more than necessary. If you're doing 500 words, you either have to learn more words each day, while still repeating the words you've learned previously so that you don't forget them, or you have to keep going with what I call the boring part for twice as long. One trick that you can use to make up for a lack of vocabulary is that you should watch or read something you've already read or watched in another language that you wouldn't mind using again. That leads to you understanding a lot more words just from context and from you remembering the story. If you insist on looking at every word that you don't understand, that takes away from the enjoyment and it gets in the way of you learning new words from context. Sadly, you don't really have a way to choose the vocabulary from most apps. So if you're doing Duolingo or any other app aiming to teach languages, that's a problem. But as I mentioned earlier, I've made my own, and it aims to teach those 200 words and 50 extra based on your own interests. If you want that, then it's a one-time purchase, but for the ones that don't want to use that, then there's a 200 word list that you can get as a free PDF, and then you just use Anki or your own flashcards and you'll get what you need. I'm considering adding a few of the interest packs as well. Those would be those extra 50 words. Now, regardless of whether you're using my app, Anki, or just making your own flashcards, I would only try to do 5 words per day. It doesn't sound like much, but it gets you reading or watching things in the new language within 2 months. That's a lot quicker than what most people manage. Language learning does take a long time, so the best way is always going to be the one that makes it easier for you to keep going. That's what my method does, and it's the reason why 250 words is the perfect amount.